Okay, hello everybody. Now, before I talk, let me give you a quick introduction to myself. Like Tim correctly pronounced, my name is Noam. I am the team lead for Claroty Team 82. Now, my day job is pretty cool in my opinion. My job is to take a look at all of these different kinds of devices and try and break them, find vulnerabilities, and responsibly disclose them to the vendor. Now, here you can see my lab in Tel Aviv. This is essentially my playground. And when I said all sorts of devices, I really do mean it. This is one of, I think, 8 racks. Well, we have all sorts of different devices in different fields. So we're talking about OT, like HMI, PLCs, any kind of controller or SCADA systems, medical, meaning patient monitors, ultrasound, and of course, my personal favorite, IoT, in the form of IP cameras, intercom, basically anything that is not a Windows machine. And our job is to break them, find vulnerabilities, and understand how attackers could be exploiting them in the wild. However, today I'm going to showcase to you something a little bit different because I'm going to showcase to you a real-life example of an OT and IoT attack when Iranian IPT tried and targeted critical infrastructure in the US. However, before we jump in, we need to have a little bit of background. Because you see, Iran is one of the biggest players in the world of threat landscape when it comes to OT and IoT. Specifically, in this case, we covered another Iranian attack made by the Cyber Avenger group in late 2023, where they targeted Unitronics devices. This is this baby right here. It is basically a PLC HMI combo. And during one morning, a wide range of companies got woken up and saw this scary screen on their device. And essentially, they've been ransomware and their devices were shut down out of control. Now, these specific devices were used heavily in water facilities in the States. And of course, the minute we're talking about water and critical infrastructure, news began spreading like wildfire and panic began to spread because people did not know if they could trust the water they are drinking. And of course, the main question when we're talking about ransomware attack is, was the only thing the attacker did is change the screen into this scary message, or more was done behind the scenes? Did the logic actually change? Now, immediately to allow people to relax a little bit, CISA published this advisory right here when they instructed people how to protect themselves against this attack. However, our goal was not only to protect people, but also better understand what happened behind the scenes. So this is why I simply told my boss, hey, I need a device. And this is actually my desk and my device. And my job was to try and connect to the device and understand how it works with the goal of allowing users that have affected devices to exfiltrate forensic evidence from the device, meaning better understand what actually happened to their device, who was the attacker behind this attack other than the scary name Cyber Avengers, and understand what has been going on. So after some problem around with makeshift wires, I managed to connect to the device. And next I moved to understanding how to talk with Unitronics devices. Now this is very common. When we're talking about OT, we are talking about proprietary protocols. And in this case, nothing was that's changed. Because to connect to and talk to Unitronic devices, I had to understand the PCOM proprietary protocol implemented by Unitronics, which of course is not documented, not allowed. So after a lot of nights of reverse engineering, both the engineering workstation and the device, I built a very simple PCOM client. And with great understanding of the protocol, I could connect to devices and actually extract forensic evidence from the devices. Now, this is super interesting because here you can see actual forensic evidence extracted from affected device. And we can see whatever happened to it. We can see that the PLC name was changed. We can see the exact date, time zone of both the PLC and the attacker's computer, and a lot of miscellaneous information about the attacker's computer, including the username, the file system path, and even the languages that were installed on their computer. Now, we worked with various government agencies and gave them access to our tool. And through combined efforts, we were able to actually put a name and a face behind the attackers. And a lot of sanctions and warrants were issued to the attackers behind this attack. Of course, because we believe that this knowledge should be openly accessible, we also released the entire tool set, allowing users to connect and to extract forensic information from Unitronics devices. And everything is open source, everything is accessible freely on our GitHub. Now we are actually getting to the interesting part, and for the reason that you all came today, because during the same time, the same at APT were also active on various different fields. You see, in October 2023, they've released a statement that they've hacked various gas stations in Israel and in the US. And unlike many other APTs or a hacking group that claim to hack something, they released a lot of evidence to showcase that they really did it. So we're talking about video surveillance from various gas stations around the globe, a lot of miscellaneous data about control systems, and a lot of scripts being executed. Now, the minute I saw that, I had a very obvious question. What does it actually mean to hack a gas station? I mean, were they coming in a hoodie to a gas station and then sniffing out gas? Probably not. So this is how an actual gas station equipment looks like. This is the pump that we all connect to, and it's basically composed of different sections. At the bottom, we have the physical stuff. We have the actual valves, we have the pumps, everything that actually handles the gas. And at the top, we have the brains. We have the point of sale. We have the command and control of the whole system that tells it, hey, please fill this amount of gas. And the top part is what actually was hacked in this case. And specifically, Geissboy Cytomat 360, which is the platform, Cytomat, that's right, 360, which is the platform that the attackers targeted. Now, from quick analysis of what Cytomats are available, we discover that behind the scenes, it is, like most things, a Linux system. And because it is a Linux system, it is fairly easy to identify it and hopefully not attack it. However, from using internet scanning devices, we found over 200 devices months after the attack that are exposed and accessible to the internet. Meaning all of these 200 devices are real-life gas stations that expose their services to the internet and could be exploited by the attackers. And as you can see, the main leader after the attack is still the US, meaning over 81 gas stations in the States are vulnerable to this attack and expose this device. And of course, to make matters worse, we have this CISA advisory from 2019 that has a 9.8 CVSS vulnerability on it on this exact device. And when we read a little bit, we find that the vulnerability themselves are super shallow and easy to spot. It is a hard-coded credentials for the HTTP and SSH server, meaning anyone that is able to access these devices is able to use these hard-coded credentials and simply connect and own your device. And of course, we have this exploit DB to make things even more simple. And we can see that they instruct how to find and how to exploit, and including the default credentials on the Cytomat systems. And we can see that this exploit was uploaded in 2023, pretty soon to the attack. And of course, it was uploaded by an Iranian citizen. So it all looked pretty simple enough. However, when we uncover deeper, we discovered that this is just the entry of the rabbit hole. And behind the scenes, we had something way bigger. Because I'm gonna give you a little spoiler, we identified a vendor agnostics malware platform that targeted not simple one vendor, but instead gave the attackers in the APT the ability to infect and control and fully backdoor a wide range of devices used by various industries in the world. Let's take a look at a very short example of different devices that were targeted. And we do see a lot of different fields that the attackers targeted in their attack. We see IT like routers and 4G routers. We see IoT like IP cameras and access points. And of course, OT like the Unitronics and the Phoenix contact devices. In their attack, in their platform, the attackers build one unified platform to attack various devices, infect them, and have full backdoor capabilities, lying dormant and waiting to attack in the right time. And this was exactly what triggered our research. We identified a sample of one such malware in VirusTotal. In this case, we did not know it was malware initially. All we knew is that it is a packed binary and it's running on ARM 32-bit big endian CPU architecture. Now, when I saw this, I was confused because ARM 32 is a dead, big endian is a dead CPU or a CPU architecture. Almost no newer devices are using it, and it should not be uploaded very soon that commonly. And after a very quick look in my lab, I found only half a dozen of devices that are ARM 32 big endian, meaning whoever uploaded it from a very interesting device. So because I had no device to actually run this malware, which at that time I didn't know was fully malware, I had no very simple sandbox to run this device, this binary. So I had to emulate it. And because I had no libraries, no LD preload, no nothing, I had to emulate it raw in memory. So I used Unicorn, and I actually implemented a lot of syscalls to allow the malware to run. So let's say the malware tries to read a file from the file system, and it calls a syscall. I run it in Unicorn, and I implement the syscall, and then I am able to fully control what the malware does. This gives me a very good ability to run the malware no matter what, and of course, great safety, because the malware will not do anything I do not allow it to do. And after a lot of prying around, we discovered that the malware is packed using a modified UPX packer. You see, in UPX, usually we have the UPX magic, and the attackers scrambled it with random data. And in addition, the entire UPX header was malformed. All the CRC checks were malformed. And instead, the attackers just packed the binary and scrambled everything. This meant that no out-of-the-box UPX packer could unpack it, and we had to simply compile it without a check. However, the minute we compiled it, we got access to a real-life malware that was built on the ORPAC platform. So let's start by examining the capabilities of this malware and how the attackers actually manage to fully implement a backdoor on such a wide range of devices, and what kind of techniques did they use to stay undetected and avoid detection by defenders. Now, the first thing we noticed that inside the malware sample we had, there was a very strange GUID. After some time, we discovered that this GUID is used to identify specific victims, meaning every victim that was infected by the malware had their own unique GUID, and that way the attackers were able to identify which kind of victim is contacting them. Now, this GUID is very important because it is used by the malware to identify itself in front of the attacker's CNC server, and also to do a lot of unpacking of the and a lot of systems and calls inside its lifetimes. Now, this is a very common technique we see attackers using, having a GUID inside the malware that is easy to patch dynamically in the, after compiling the binary. This meant that if I want to, let's say, infect 10 people, I don't have to recompile my malware 10 times, each time switching the GUID. Instead, all I need to do is compile it one time and switch it on runtime, the GUID, and that way I am able to attack and identify 10 different victims. After that, after identifying itself with the GUID, the malware began unpacking its configuration. You see, in order to avoid detection, the malware had an encrypted segment in its memory that contained the entire configuration for the malware's behavior. And this segment was kept encrypted the entire time, not decrypted fully, but instead only encrypted and decrypted on demand whenever the malware needed some kind of capability. So let's take a look at this function. For example, we can see in line 11 that they call get decrypted config, which is my convention into naming it. It was not named. And in 37, in the index 37 in the malware's configuration, we can see that libc.so resides. Then they call 36, which is the system function name, meaning by using this configuration, they are able to call the system function from libc and execute arbitrary code. Now, this is a very cool, unique technique, and to actually decrypt this encrypted configuration, they use the GUID, meaning that is also able to patch dynamically to every victim. And by using the GUID and the SHA hash of the GUID, they are able to infer the key and IV for the configuration of the malware. So all we did is implement it simply in Python on our one sample, and we encrypted the entire configuration. Now, this is a very cool technique for the malware to use because it gives it a very high adaptability, meaning everything is configured via an encrypted memo segment. We can write it, we can change it, we can alter it. And of course, it supports it is a generic way to support various way of operation. So let's take a look at these two samples right here, coming from two different malwares, targeting two different device families. And as we can see, the configuration is actually modified slightly between them. Let's take a look at the libc. Because these are two different devices, they have different libc SOs. So each one points to the correct libc SO name. And of course, because they're running different flavors of Linux, one is having a script in initd and the second in rcd. This way, the malware is able to adapt, basically supporting any kind of architecture the attackers choose to exploit. And by having one malware with a different configuration, they are able to fully attack and control various platforms. Next, like any good malware, the malware installs persistency, meaning it wants to make sure that whenever it gets executed, the attacker's backdoor will be up and running. And to do that, the attackers chose to implement an init script, either in the RC, initd, or systemd. And that way, whenever the device boots up, the attacker's script will recode, making sure the attacker's backdoor is up and running, contacting the attacker's server. And this gets us to the next step, which is actually making network connection. You see, the malware's job was not only to infect and do some kind of a ransomware attack. Instead, the attacker had a bigger plan in mind. This is a very interesting shift we are seeing from this attacker in specific, because if in the past we would see drive-by attacks where a ransomware or scary note would be shown to the attacker, here we do see a lot of intentions of laying dormant, waiting in an unknown user's networks, waiting for the right time to strike and do whatever they want, move laterally in the network, shut down devices, whatever they choose. This is a very unique technique, and to do that, they need to connect to their CNC server. However, like most things, the attackers did not want to be found. So they implemented a wide range of techniques to avoid detection, and this is a very cool technique that we see a lot of attackers using. You see, instead of in order to contact the C2 servers, the attacker had a DNS name for their server. However, DNS is plain text protocol, meaning if you want to, let's say, translate google.com, you will transmit google.com over the wire in a decrypted manner. However, the attackers did not want to make it aware what kind of CNC servers they are using, so they chose to, instead of using DNS, they used DNS-over-HTTPS. Specifically, they use Cloudflare DNS services, and by making an HTTPS request with this data, they are able to translate the domain name server, domain name of their CNC server into the IP address. And as you can see, unlike DNS, which showcases plain text what the DNS name that is being translated, by doing DNS over HTTPS, they are able to stay undetected in the networks, and they are able to bypass any mitigation trying to find the DNS name of the CNC server. After that, they are connecting to the CNC server, and specifically they are connecting to this DNS name right here. Now we see that this DNS name was registered around the same time of the attack, and it is registered to an unknown entity somewhere in Germany. This is the country that this server resides in. And by looking at what kind of ports are open on this device, we are able to infer and understand exactly how devices connect to these CNC servers. We see two services exposed on this server, MQTT and RabbitMQ. Now, MQTT is a very common protocol in the world of IoT, and this was the protocol used by devices to contact the CNC server. The RabbitMQ, on the other hand, was used by the attackers themselves in order to connect and control the various clients that the CNC server was connected to. Now, in the code of the malware, we were able to see how the MQTT over TLS packets were created, and we're able to see how the username, password, and client ID are constructed. You see, once again, the GUID was used as the client ID, and that way the attackers were able to identify exactly what victim they are working against and what the victim they want to execute commands on. And like using DNS-over-HTTPS, once again, the attackers used MQTTS or MQTT over TLS in order to encrypt every packet and make sure they're staying undetected. Now, immediately when the device connects to the attacker's CNC server, it used to send a message over the GUID/hello topic. This is the way for MQTT to connect. And in this message, we see a lot of identifiable information about the device, including the host name, the geolocation, the exact device type, anything that could help the attackers know and understand where they are residing in and how they can move laterally. And after sending this hello message, the devices subscribe to the /push MQTT command, MQTT topic to wait for attackers' command. Through these topics, the attackers are able to fully control devices and do what they wish. Now, let's see what kind of capabilities this malware actually had. And of course, like most times, system is everything. The most used command by the attackers was a simple system command, where basically they gave an OS command for devices to execute, and the devices instead showcase the result of this command. And to do that, they used another interesting technique. Instead of just running the command, they ran the command and poured the outputs to /temp/random.txt, a random chars. Now, this is a very unique approach, and this could be used to identify if the attackers are on your system. Because if you see this kind of command being executed, it is probably this malware right here. Other than that, the attackers implemented a wide range of different capabilities, including network scans to move laterally in your networks, of course, the system, and a self-delete command in case the attackers want to finish their business. Now, let's take a quick look at the attacker's malware's lifetime and understand how it behaves. So whenever the malware starts through the back door, it unpacks and decrypts the configuration it has, and it checks if the attackers decided that it should kill itself and stop execution. If it does, it simply deletes itself from the system and cleans everything and quits quietly. And if not, it connects to the attacker's CNC server and waits for command for whatever the attackers choose to do. Now, when we had this good understanding, next we moved to IOCs, meaning how users are able to actually know if they've been exploited and affected by this malware. And we released a full range of IOCs in our blogs. However, I see it's cat, so simply go to our blog and you can read the entire set of IOCs. Our goal was to allow the community to be able to identify if the malware was running on their system. And this is why we released all the IOCs on our blog, so feel free to read it. Now, after we had a good understanding of how the malware behaved, our next goal was to actually see it in action. So we created a very simple lab experiment where we ran the malware sample. We obtained our little endian sample, and we ran it using QEMU and Shroot, emulating a fake device. Then we set up a simple Cloudflare server and a C2 server to see the entire thing up in action. And this is our setup right here. You can see on the left the QEMU and Shroot system where we actually ran the unpacked malware. And on the right, we have our fake CNC server, the MQTT server. And whenever we let everything go up and running, we can see that the device connects to the CNC server and sends the hello message exactly like we predicted it would from reverse engineering. And that the device receives message on the /push and execute arbitrary messages from the command, from the server. Now, after we had a very good understanding of how the malware behaves, how the attackers approached the attack, what kind of targets they had in mind, and what kind of devices they were targeting, let's talk a bit about how we helped solve things up. So first of all, we released a full blog the minute we knew of it, and everything was up and ready and public, containing all the analysis of the malware and all the IOCs that users are able to see to check if their networks were compromised. Now, usually when I do research like that, the main question I ask myself is, how can I know if I did a good analysis and I got a pretty good grasp at what the attacker is capable? And sadly, usually you can't, you have no idea. However, here we got a pretty good hint, because soon after we released our blog, I guess the hacker itself, Mr. Sol, tweeted about it and released some statements in their Telegram message saying they've decided to sell the malware. I don't know who will buy it after we dissected its capabilities. However, this is a very clear indication that the attacker were unhappy with our analysis. And of course, soon after, we saw that in the darknet, there is an intention of selling the IOCONTROL malware capabilities, and Mr. Sol created an account just around the time that we released our blog and decided and tried to sell their malware platform. However, this was not enough because, quite frankly, most of the people that are affected by these kinds of malwares are unaware that they are affected by it. They are unaware that their devices are internet exposed, that they've been exploited. And by simply releasing the blog and the IOCs, most actually exploited targets will never know they are targeted. So we worked with various government agencies to make sure the actual infrastructure of the attacker is taken offline. And I can tell you, as you can see, that currently their servers were seized and all operation of this malware from the server was completely shut down. Now, before I get to questions, and feel free to ask any questions you have, let's talk a bit about this case because it is a very interesting case. Because we don't see a lot of OT attacks that are not simple drive-bys or ransomware attacks. Actual OT attacks are very far and few in between. And I think it's very important to actually see and learn how attackers behave, how they approach their attacks, and what kind of techniques and approaches they use in order to avoid detection and to actually learn from it. Because otherwise we have no idea what we're protecting against and we have no chance to actually catch anything. So if you have any questions, I believe we have a way to do it. And if not, I'll be in the booth, so feel free to approach and ask any questions.